It took about 8 seconds for Hollywood, Twitter, social media, Silicon Valley, political pundits on both sides of the aisle. It took about 8 seconds for them to spring into action, to push each other out of the way, to stand on the still warm bodies of what happened this morning, to push their various political agendas. We saw this quite clearly with Twitter using the trending topics to push an agenda, in particular, to trend worldwide things like, you know, that this was motivated by race in some way, even though there was zero indication of that. There was zero indication from the persons, and I'm not going to say their name or show their picture. The person who did it said there was no motivation based on race. But that didn't stop Twitter from making number one, trend worldwide, things like white supremacy and, this idea that it was racially motivated. Why? Because that's what Twitter cares about, dividing people by an innate skin, color or race, things nobody can control. That's what Twitter cares about, dividing. And of course, there was no evidence for that. In fact, many of those that lost their lives were not Asian. In fact, 6 of the 8 were not. I believe 2 were white, 1 was Hispanic. So, no. And I see a lot of the responses to people like, yeah, but you don't really know. Okay, so you admit that you just want this to be true. You want it to be racially motivated because that plays into your new virtue signal about, the bamboo ceiling and all this stuff. As far as I can tell, the Asian community is doing extraordinarily well in the West. In fact, it is the top earning demographic by significant margin. Do they face discrimination? Yeah, they do. But it would probably interest you to look into who they face most of it from. So what Twitter saw was an opportunity to blame white people. And so that's what that Twitter was interested in. Of course, aided by manually curating the trending tab, with things like Asian Americans and Pacific Islander communities speak out following reports of bad behavior directed at Asians. Again, the headline said, 8 people lost their life, including 6 Asian women. Well, they happen to be these spas, the infamous. Now, as far as I know, there's really no evidence to suggest that these spas were the full release variety. But look, this dude is a coward, pathetic. The one good thing he could have done was ended himself before he ever did this. Or ended himself after, like the coward he is, because now this dude gets to have a fan club, gets to sit in. Yeah, he'll be in prison, but he'll have people putting money on his books. He'll eat well. I mean, that's the real story with this. By tomorrow, it'll be all about, tomorrow we'll spin up the weapon debate again, depending on what he chose to use. That'll start. Then the government will be talking about that, so people can stop talking about what's happening at the border, or whatever thing they want to make go away. The same people spin up the same conversations. The real conversation should be around mental health, in my opinion. But you have absolute losers like George Takei. The body's still warm. making sure he blames Republicans in Atlanta. This is disgusting. You're not a hero for this. And neither are those pretending to be super upset about it. Look, you didn't know these people. I'm not going to... It sucks. There's literally nothing else you can say about it. And what you'll end up with is two camps of people, both unwilling to move. And so it'll happen again. Because both people are so deep, both sides are so deeply entrenched in their beliefs. They have no interest in making practical changes. No interest in actually examining, how we got here with this dude being a moron, coward, loser. Decided today's the day they're going to remember my name. Well, I'm not going to speak their name nor put their picture up because that's what they want deep down. And the idea that this is a great time to politicize things, I know, of course it's not, but people are going to do it anyway. And like I said, we'll go through all the same arguments tomorrow and later today. And everyone will say, look at this example of look at this far-fetched example of a thing. That could work. And then the other side will say, yeah, that's ridiculous. That won't work. And then 6 weeks will pass. 6 hours will pass. And everybody will forget and move on until it happens again. Because nobody wants to take practical measures and start looking at, what are the situations that are leading mostly young men to do this kind of stuff. People want to politicize it, talk about the tools that they use to carry it out. But at the end of the day, all of these men have several things in common. And we don't want to talk about mental health. We don't want to talk about, the systems, how they're set up, where, people can't get help. And it's messed up. Of course, this is terrible, and I wish it would never happen again, ever. But it's going to. It's going to keep happening until reasonable people on both quote-unquote sides can stop virtue signaling and start getting to work, figuring out how to identify these situations before they happen. Every time it's the same thing. Yeah, they were a loner. Yeah, they did this or they did that and they did this. We saw this. We did, and as we always unravel everything, it's practically the same series of events that lead up to it. And it's like people are more concerned with their virtue signaling. They're pushing their political agenda than fixing it. Because if it were fixed, these people wouldn't have anything to complain about anymore, right? It seems pretty simple to me that George Takei doesn't care about these people who lost their lives today. He cares about sticking it to Republicans. Most of these people are loners and apolitical. And I think when it's an inconvenient political message, maybe that gets buried. We still don't know what happened in Vegas, do we? We're never going to know. Conveniently, I think, in my opinion. Again, when asked, were there any religious motivations? Not that I'm aware of. Are there political motivations? Nothing political. So tomorrow, what are we going to have? Articles about incels, probably. Because that's the one thing that was mentioned. You had he did take responsibility for the events. He said early on, he claims that, and the chief said this is still early, but he does claim that it was not racially motivated. He apparently has an issue, what he considers a addiction to, and maybe this dude was watching too much prawn and sees these locations as something that allows him to go to these places, and it's a temptation for him that he wanted to eliminate. Does that sound like a mentally stable person? Of course not. This person had mental health issues, obviously. Obviously. What man his age doesn't want to be constantly in some form of debauchery with someone else? But we don't all think that the cure for that is ending their lives. This person was mentally ill, and nobody's going to talk about that. They're going to talk about how this is Trump's fault, or Republicans will joke about how this is Biden's America. And then you'll have idiots who are like, well, we need to repeal 2A. And then you'll have people that want to talk about how, well, if these people were, had somebody on site that could protect themselves, and then we'll forget about it. Seriously, screw anybody who's taking advantage of this situation to push their agenda. It's pathetic, it's cowardly, and it's never gonna stop until people start talking about the real problem, and that's the mental health crisis in this country. People don't do this because they think they have other options. Okay? People don't do this stuff because they have a support system around them that they ignore. People don't do this stuff because they're in the right state of mind. We keep ignoring this. It's a sincere, severe, documented problem, especially in young males. But that doesn't get political points, does it? If you enjoyed this video, I make 5 to 6 of them a day, and I hope that you'll hit that red subscribe button down below. Stay safe out there. Sometimes we get reminded that the world isn't exactly the safe place that we think it is. And we get an opportunity to get right back on things that are important. And I wasn't sure about making this video, but the virtue signaling and everything else is just pathetic. Focus on the cause, not political points.